Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking Math for Business and Finance and Math Applications. And we're working on the theory videos for Chapter 22, the Business Statistics. And in the last video, we had stopped at the measures of dispersion, which we had discussed, gave an example of what a range looks like, being a highest value to a lowest value. But I had said that the next couple of videos is going to cover standard deviation. So that's what we're going to jump into. Standard deviation starts to become much more complex because we do start out with, and here's this aspect of, you have to know all of the concepts because they keep coming more back into play as underlying concepts. In that one of the first videos, we had talked about mean, median, and mode. Okay, well, we need to know what the mean is if we're going to discuss standard deviation. So if you don't understand what the mean is, you're dead in the water when it comes to standard deviation. But standard deviation in and of itself, now you start to get a little bit more math heavy, and it becomes a little bit more complicated. So definitely, pay attention. Make sure you understand this. Because this standard deviation, just as the mean becomes, understanding the concept of a mean is an underlying fundamental to standard deviation. If you don't understand standard deviation, then you're not going to understand when it comes to normal distribution, or when you're taking business statistics. You'll get into binomial distributions and things like that. You're going to be, if you don't understand standard deviation, you're dead in the water when it comes to that subject matter. Okay, so one thing builds upon another, and spend the time making sure that you understand what standard deviation is and how it's calculated. Okay, so we're picking up here, and it says it measures the spread of data around the mean, right? Let me, come back up here, right? So at the end of the last video, as I was talking about the range and standard deviation, I said this was my mean, and the definition is the spread of data around the mean. And I had said this is one standard deviation, this is two standard deviations, this is three standard deviations. Being 68% around the mean, 95 around the mean, 98 around the mean. And remember that these figures, are just quick guesstimates. If I wanted to know exactly, I would go and look it up in the book. Okay, but here, here's where we go, and we're going to start to try to figure out standard deviation. Right? Kind of follow a step process, and I do have a tendency to follow this step process. Right? So first it says find the mean of the set of data. So you're going to have a set of data with all kinds of data points in this set of data, and you want to find the mean. Well, remember, the mean is nothing more than the average of that data. Okay, so you find the mean first. Then you subtract the mean from each piece of data to find the deviation. Okay, so let's say my mean was 3. Okay, that's the average. My mean was 3. And let's say this particular point in data here was the number 4. Okay, well, number 2 says subtract the mean from each piece of data. So if that piece of data was 4, I'm subtracting the mean from it, which means my deviation is 1. Okay, now this second piece of data, let's say that's 5. Okay, so then I do the same thing. 5 minus 3 is equal to 2. Let's say this third piece of data was the number 2. Okay, 2 minus 3 means I would have a minus 1. All right, so that's the deviation of that piece of data. So that's step number 2. Okay, so then you take, for step number 3, it says square each deviation, right? Which means multiply each deviation by itself. So basically you would take 1 squared, 2 squared, and minus 1 squared. Okay, so 1 squared is 1 times 1, so that means that would be, well, let's take 1 squared, 2 squared, and minus 1 squared. So 1 squared is 1 times 1, which is equal to 1. 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is equal to 4. And minus 1 times a minus 1 is equal to a 1. Okay. So that's step number 3. You're squaring each of those deviations. Right? Now number 4, step 4, it says sum all of the squared deviations. So the sum of all of my squared deviations here is 6. 1 plus 4 plus 1 is 6. Right? Step 5, divide the sum of the squared deviations. So this 6, I'm going to divide it by n minus 1. Now n is where n is equal to the number of pieces of data. Okay, so in this case here, we only had 3 pieces of data. Okay, we had a 4, a 5, and a 2. Right, and so since I have 3 pieces of data, n minus 1, we're going to plug the number of pieces of data. In this case, we had 3 pieces of data, and we're going to subtract 1, which means 2. So we're going to take the square deviations and divide it by the number 2. Okay, and that gives me 3. Right. So then we're going to take, for step 6, find the square root of the number obtained in step number 5, and this is the standard deviation. So if I have if I take my 6 and I divide it by 2, that gives me 3. I take the square root of 3, and whatever that gives me is my standard deviation for that set of data. Okay, so pause the video and watch it again if you don't understand this. Okay, because I tried to, even though I didn't have, I was making stuff up as I was going along here. Okay, I tried to keep it as simple as possible, and I'm if I wanted to know what the square root of 3 is, well, let me look at my calculator. If I take 3 and I hit the square root number, my standard deviation actually ends up being 1.73. Okay, that's what my standard deviation would have ended up being. So the square root of 3 is 1.73 standard deviations. Okay. So I went through each of the steps with this very, very simple set of data. Okay, but in the next video, what I'm going to do is, oops, I should have erased that. In the next video, I'm actually going to go through what's in the textbook, all right, with the charts that they have and the illustrations that they have, so that you can see how these steps apply to what's in the textbook. Okay, because that's going to be, it is a process. You're going to follow this 6-step process to find your standard deviation. All right, no matter what the set of data that you're being given. So I made up some data here, okay, and kept it very, very simple. The textbook supplies some illustration for you, and you will apply the 6 steps to that information there. Okay, and then of course you're going to have problems that you'll have to do, and you'll have to follow the 6 steps. But do I have to memorize all 6 steps? No, I'm not going to memorize all 6 steps, because I can quickly look in a book, and actually I look at the illustrations, because the illustrations are shown in that step-by-step format, and that allows me to be able to calculate the standard deviation. So with that said, I'm going to stop here. You've seen one look at the standard deviation. If you don't understand what I've presented, go back and pause the video, rewind it, watch it again. And if you still don't understand these steps, feel free to call and speak to an instructor. However, watch the next video first, because I'm going to give you you're going to see what's in the book, these steps applied to it, and maybe it'll click after you watch that video. But if not, definitely feel free to speak with an instructor. Okay.